I'd like to read to you from the May issue of the Christian Womanhood magazine, just to give you a little taste of what you would receive every month if you were getting this magazine. This is called Who Was Marlene Evans? Anyone who knew Marlene Evans knew that her words were above reproach. She used such caution and discretion in choosing her words. She also used caution and discretion in leaving much unsaid, especially the negative. Mrs. Evans' care in choosing her words was one of the great distinguishing factors in her being a different woman. Carol Fry Tudor tells of an instance regarding Mrs. Evans' talk. One day I was driving away from the college and I glanced over to see Mrs. Evans driving in the lane adjacent to me. I slowed down and waved to her, trying to get her attention. Mrs. Evans was obviously talking out loud, and she was gesturing with her hands as she talked. I looked to the passenger side of the car to see with whom she was talking. The seat was empty. I kept trying to get her attention, but Mrs. Evans was enthusiastically talking away while staring straight ahead. The whole situation hit me as funny. I mean, I knew she loved to talk, and we loved to get together to talk, but this was the ultimate. She wanted to talk so much. She was enjoying talking to an empty car. She was obviously desperate. Later, I made her sarcastic remark about it, and she said, "Carol, I was practicing talking." "What do you mean, practicing talking?" "I want my words to count for eternity," she said. "I don't want to hurt people. I want to influence every person I'm around, so I have to practice what I'm going to say." Loretta Walker recalls traveling to a ladies' meeting where Mrs. Evans planned how she would respond to keep from hurting another's feelings. A year earlier, when they had traveled to this particular meeting, she had been experiencing a lot of pain with arthritis and degenerative disc disease. She had needed a wheelchair so she would not have to walk through the airport. At this time, she was feeling remarkably better and had the strength to walk. She said to Loretta, "If the pastor is at the gate with a wheelchair, say nothing. I'll use it. I don't want him feeling embarrassed by telling him I don't need it." Mrs. Evans cared more for the feelings of others than she cared for her pride, riding in a wheelchair when she didn't need it. Jane Grafton once asked, "Mrs. Evans, how do you always know what to say to people? You always seem to have just the right answers, especially for delicate and critical issues." "I practice what I'm going to say, and I try to think ahead what I'm going to face in conversations or situations, and then I plan my words. I often write down what I want to say, and then I practice and practice and practice it, sometimes saying it over 100 or more times, so that if the situation happens, I am prepared and don't say something I'll later regret. I like to have my press release memorized if I need it." Mrs. Evans was well known for her press releases. She always wanted to be careful, especially in sensitive situations, not to tell more than should be told. She was especially careful not to tell more information than someone wanted to be told. One time a family member had some health issues. Because it seemed many people had opinions on the subject, Mrs. Evans called the family member, talked through exactly what the person wanted told, and that became her press release. If more questions were asked, she simply repeated the press release. She was careful to protect others' wishes and their privacy. Mrs. Evans often said, "Get your stance." The beauty of her planning what she was going to say prevented her from having to pick up the pieces and avoid all the ramifications from spewing out the negative. She always tried to be prepared in what she would say, whether it was in answer to a critical remark or to the news of an unexpected pregnancy, where her stance was always, "Oh, that's wonderful." She was not for abortion, and she never wanted a child to hear you weren't wanted. She decided many subjects that were off limits. She was careful never to overstep the boundaries she had set. For example, she never made thoughtless comments to single ladies such as, "When are you going to get married?" She never asked unkind questions to childless couples like, "When are you going to have a baby?" As a result, Mrs. Evans seldom had to apologize for her words. She talked with purpose. She planned her conversations, and she planned her words. That she was very principled in her speech and in her conversation was very evident. Boy, am I challenged by this thought, and hope that you've learned something new to do from Mrs. Evans, even from heaven, by us sharing all these great teachings. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice.